Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Last week, via the community tab of this channel, I asked you, who are the weirdest metal bands? Crazy weird, silly weird, scary weird, experimental weird, weird, go nuts, tell me all about the weird, and you took my advice. You went nuts. You told me all about the weird. So many comments from so many people about so many bands. And today, as a unit, as a collective, as a group, we are going to sort through a bunch of these comments to determine who are the weirdest metal bands of all time. And I'm not joking. There are a lot of comments. And on top of that, I'm exhausted and sweaty because it's humid. And I just got back from vacation. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Exhumed Corpse says, dripping without a doubt for me in every aspect of weird. I can see that. I feel that. I can vibe with that. Probably one of the only, slam, brutal death metal bands I can think of that, found a way to be genuinely unpredictable and to go into, weird, experimental, jagged territory without compromising being a brutal slam death metal band. The only other band that comes to mind that has pulled that off is maybe Afterbirth with their last album especially. Very unpredictable, very heavy, very demented. Maybe not one of the weirdest metal bands of all time, but definitely one of the weirdest brutal death metal or slam death metal bands of all time. Bow Ties Are Brilliant writes, obligatory Mr. Bungle mention because that's the first metal band I think of when I think weird. And for good reason. Mr. Bungle were extremely weird. Pioneers of weird metal. Or I guess to be more specific, avant-garde and experimental metal. There are just so many wild vocal dynamics and acrobatics, so many weird influences from funk rock, alternative rock, jazz fusion, thrash metal, noise, tango, techno music, Middle Eastern music, pop music, if you name it, it probably existed at some point on a Mr. Bungle record. Quite frankly, these guys walked so that every other experimental avant-garde rock or metal band out there, so that every other weird-ass fucking metal band could run. Evan Hyde 5336 writes, just gonna say Gwar and get it out of the way. That's a fair, solid, respectable choice as well. I mean, musically speaking, they're a fairly straightforward kind of thrash metal, hardcore punk kind of band with comedy skits and shit like that thrown in, but Gwar have their own lore and a crazy visual aesthetic inspired by old monster movies and 80s pulp B-horror movies and Evil Dead and shit like that. There's a shock rock component to their live show as well with all these different stunts and pyrotechnics and skits. I remember seeing them in, I think it would have been September 2021, and they did this whole bit where they stab Joe Biden in the ass with a vaccine, and then they decapitate him on stage. And all throughout the show too, the characters are spraying blood and other bodily fluids into the crowd. Frequent collaborator and friend of the channel, Mad Mike, simply says Diablo Swing Orchestra, and he is 100% correct. Much like Mr. Bungle, there are so many different dynamics and acrobatics and influences brought into their sound. Groove metal, symphonic metal, opera, funk, disco, big brass and jazz and swing music, EDM and dubstep, lots of horns and strings and unpredictable and thrilling progressions and transitions from song to song and often from piece to piece within any one particular song. We're not really doing a tier list per se of weird metal bands, but if we were, Diablo Swing Orchestra would be an S tier all the fucking way, baby. The Cyanide Smoker writes, macabre. They are such a bizarre take on death metal, and they really stuck with the serial killer gimmick, but in an off-kilter way. They are heavy, but in a more creepy way. They're more unnerving, I would say, than weird, but, I can definitely see why someone would bring them up in this discussion. I mean, it's not unnatural or abnormal for, a death metal band to write about violence and serial killers, but with the way they approach it specifically by bringing in influences from folk melodies and nursery rhymes and campfire songs and shit like that, it definitely adds an extra layer of weird and creepy and scary. Easy Bait Coven writes, Botanist, while overall not the weirdest musically, is perhaps the most aesthetically unique metal band I've come across. There really is no other act that can claim the niche of plant-themed black metal band that uses hammered dulcimers sung supposedly from the perspective of a misanthropic, forest-dwelling entity. You're absolutely correct, and I have nothing to add because you explained yourself and this band pretty damn near perfectly, I would say. Solid 9 out of 10 comment, great job. Yeah, Botanist, check them out, folks, they're fucking weird. Edward Plain 4688 writes, Devin fucking Townsend. Yeah, 110% agree. Devin Townsend is just a weird guy in general, and that consistently transitions to everything he's doing. Like, don't get me wrong, he's a very serious, authentic, genuine person, and there's a lot of emotion and beauty in his music, but also simultaneous to that, he writes rock operas about intergalactic alien warlords with an unhealthy obsession for coffee. And he does something like Empath, which is loaded with samples of kittens and guest features from, like, Steve Vai and Chad Kroger. Magic Maddie 2024 writes, that one band that sounds like a normal stoner sludge band, but all their lyrics are about frogs. I'm pretty sure you're referring to Frog Lord, and I think I would agree. They are a goofy, silly, weird little bunch. Probably one of the more interesting and, like, self-aware, fun kind of stoner doom bands out there right now as well. Against the Wickedly Music writes, Gorguts, Portal, Leviathan, Blunt Osnord, Boris, and Liturgy come to mind for me. Almost every band you've mentioned here, they aren't just weird. They're, like, weird on a nightmarish level. Like, they just create weird, terrifying, dark, shadowy, insane music. A lot of stuff from Portal and Blut Usnord especially, I mean, it's seriously frightening, and then Gorguts, I mean, Obscura is still, like, one of the most insane technical avant-garde death metal records ever made, and stuff like From Wisdom to Hate, and Colored Sands, and Pleiades Dust, those are all fantastic as well. Liturgy as well have maybe one of the most unique and fascinating takes on black metal, like, out there right now at all. I mean, it's this wild mix of electronic influences and opera and classical influences and black metal and, like, even, like, indie and alternative rock influences, and there's a lot of theory and philosophy and lore, and it's so dense and so complex. Hanso Harrigan 6958 writes, somebody mentioned the Ned Flanders band, and I'm gonna add Dr. Colossus as well. Not the weirdest, but definitely a bit weird. I must not have seen the Ned Flanders band comment, the other one that I guess Hanso's referring to. Definitely a weird band. I mean, it's a Simpsons-themed, Ned Flanders-themed metalcore band with songs and lyrics pulled from, like, Ned Flanders quotes from The Simpsons, and everyone in the band also dressed up as Ned Flanders. It's objectively pretty goofy and silly and weird. Now, I've never heard of Dr. Colossus before until literally this moment, but apparently, according to the internet, Dr. Colossus is an Australian doom metal band from Melbourne. The band mixed doom metal with lyrical references to episodes of The Simpsons. Also, side note, if somebody can find out for me just how many more Simpsons-themed metal bands there are out there, that'd be great. Because I was under the assumption Oakley Dokley was the only one, but apparently there's two, and now I have to assume there's more. I just have to. I have to assume there's more. So if someone can find more, let me know, please and thank you. Friend of the channel, JC Rock and Metal Reviews writes, Max Sabbath, 100% agreed. I mean, it's a McDonald's fast food themed Black Sabbath parody, tribute, and cover band. What more do you need to know? They're so fucking weird. Adam Lopez, the real one, writes, Sleep Token. No! My thoughts and feelings on Sleep Token are pretty well documented at this point. I think that they're overrated and overdramatic as well. I also don't think that there's anything that wild or unique or weird about them and their sound. Like, musically, there's not much that they're doing that the likes of Bring Me the Horizon and Issues have not already done to some extent in the past. Like, sure, there is a certain theatricality and bombast to their music that you don't necessarily see within mainstream rock and metal. And I will also concede that, like, you know, their whole concept of, like, you know, everything being communicated to the lead singer via dreams, like, that maybe sounds really weird to, like, a mainstream audience. I don't know, I think it sounds just pretentious and dumb, but whatever. But, like, yeah. No. Yeah. No. Hail Hydragon writes, Brain Tentacles is one I haven't seen mentioned yet on here. Not only are Brain Tentacles supremely weird, with a very obtuse and gritty fusion of, like, extreme metal and jazz fusion, but also, I would argue that they are one of the most underrated metal bands of the 2010s, and their self-titled debut is one of the most underrated metal albums, perhaps released within the past, like, 15 years or so. Like, it's just an awesome fucking record. Got its own sound, it's got its own vibe. I love it. Happy to see this band getting mentioned here. Fuck yes. Neo Space Jet writes, figured I'd mention Bell Witch since I haven't seen their name yet, but if you think about it, they're weird for being just two guys with a 6-string bass and drums, and sure, duos exist, but no one else is as loud as them or making hour-plus long songs and calling it an album. I don't know, man. I feel like what Bell Witch is doing isn't really too far off from what I normally expect of, like, a lot of doom metal and funeral doom. Like, it's normal to have, like, just one song or, like, a couple of songs make up, like, a massive fucking record. So, yeah, we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this one. Colton358 writes, Kim Dracula, the music sucks, but it is very weird. It is, and it sucks because it is often too weird for its own good, and it feels like it's being weird for the sake of being weird. It's like equal parts Korn, Static X, Slipknot, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Marilyn Manson, Mr. Bungle, and Falling in Reverse. Out of all of the hyper weird artists that we're talking about today, Kim Dracula is maybe the only one where I'm like, you know what, you can tone it down on the weirdness, please and thank you. Like, if you could take a step back and just focus on, like, actually writing songs instead of just making weird crap, that'd be great, please and thank you. The Ooh Thrasher writes, Voivod, good weird. Agreed, Voivod are good weird. Crazy, technical, sci-fi, progressive, thrash metal, and alternative metal. I mean, over the years, they've gone through different phases and styles and lineups and iterations, but they've consistently been really weird. They've consistently made the music that they want to make, and I have the utmost respect for Voivod. I love them to pieces, one of my all-time favorite bands, and definitely a solid addition to this conversation. Empress Luna 1783 writes, based on facts, Mayhem and literally all grindcore bands, and Infant Annihilator. There's a lot to this, so we're gonna have to dissect this piece by piece. First off, literally all grindcore bands, hard disagree. There are definitely grindcore and grindcore adjacent bands that are supremely weird, and you can definitely argue that the existence of porno grind and gore grind specifically is kind of weird, but literally all grindcore bands, just like crazy, scary, silly, weird, I don't know, I don't agree with that at all. I also don't agree that Infant Annihilator is an especially weird band. I think they're mostly just kind of like edgy and provocative. And as far as Mayhem is concerned, I guess if we're talking about Grand Declaration of War, there's definitely some weird experimental trip-hoppy elements to that record. But like as a whole, I don't really see Mayhem as being like that weird. Definitely one of the most controversial bands of all time. That would be a fair argument to make, but one of the weirdest? I don't know. I mean, I guess if you like have literally no fucking idea who Mayhem are and what black metal is, and you show them like the debut or something like that, then maybe that would be weird. Maybe that would be weird for them, but like within the spectrum of extreme music, I don't know, they're not that weird. Michael MacVitty667 writes, ad nauseum is the reason I use the genre term clusterfuck metal now. For good reason, too. I mean, Imperative Imperceptible Impulse is one of the only albums I can think of that comes close to matching the insanity and intensity and audacity of Obscura from Gorguts. I mean, it's just an absolutely wild fucking record. It's a total fucking brain melter. Robert Burdine1151 writes, you know these already, but Igor and Melted Bodies, yes, absolutely. These two bands are absolutely insane. Totally fucked up, totally weird. Would love to see these two on a tour together someday. Like, that'd be really fucking awesome in my opinion. Porqué Metal writes, silly weird with all due respect because I think it's cool, then Kanto. The idea of an a cappella heavy metal, power metal band is pretty weird. It's also pretty dumb, in my opinion, but to be fair, definitely pretty weird. Friend of the channel, Jimmy from the Block 3714 writes, Pandemonium, Groin Churn for sure is one, Blood Duster is yet another very weird one, Human Remains sounds nutty, Ripping Corpse, Dayman and C have weird vocals as well. I don't really know enough about a lot of these bands to really comment, but Jimmy from the Block is a pretty well-documented expert and connoisseur on, like, underground and brutal death metal, so if he says it's weird, I'm gonna take his fucking word for it. And we're gonna wrap things up with one more comment from Metal Fury 5153, Maximum the Hormone, just listen to their song Alien, will leave you thinking, what the hell just happened? That's kind of how I feel listening to any Maximum the Hormone song. Like, they're just an absolutely fucking batshit crazy bonkers band. Dare I even say one of the most insane, brutal, and unpredictable metal bands to emerge from Japan at all, which is a big thing to say because I don't know if you notice, but Japanese metal, pretty fucking weird, pretty consistently. And I feel like this is a good place to end this off. I've been talking and ranting for a while. Those are, according to you, for the most part, the weirdest metal bands of all time. If I didn't read out your comment in this video, don't be offended. It's all good. There were literally hundreds of comments. I can't sit here and read them all out. I'd be here all fucking day. You might like that for some fucking reason, but I wouldn't like that. Feel free to tell me more about weird-ass fucking bands in the comment section below and on Discord and on other social media platforms. Press subscribe. Boom! More videos. Wow! Holy shit! And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.